This is a post that I never thought I'd write, and I'm sure many people say the same. But I also never thought I'd make such a foolish mistake. I'm really scared of how people will react to what I'm about to say. I've been married since February 2016 to an amazing man. He's helped me cope with the pain from a soul assault and emotional abuse. My husband and I, both in our late 20s, deal with depression. Our marriage isn't perfect and we've faced some tough times, especially because of our mental health struggles. I've taken him for granted and I realize now that I needed to work on our marriage and myself long before what happened in the past month. The person I had an affair with was a school friend, someone I've known since I was 11 years old. He was a year ahead of me in school and we were part of the same group of friends. We never dated and after I changed schools after high school, we lost touch. About a year or so later, he reappeared in my life, which seemed to be a recurring pattern. We chatted and sometimes went for drives, but then he went off to university and disappeared again. We remained friends on social media throughout all this time. Then, during my third year of university, I was diagnosed with anxiety and prescribed medication. I ended up reaching out to him because I always felt like I was to blame for his occasional disappearances. During my third year, he became the person I would call in the early hours of the morning when I was struggling. We got close and he offered to come and visit me, which I eagerly accepted because I was single and he claimed to be as well. He came to stay with me, and we ended up sharing the same bed. He saw me undressed and also engaged in acts of soul nature, except I was incredibly uncomfortable and apart from kissing I kept saying no, but I was young and very stupid back then, and he got me with the very emotional story of his ex-girlfriend going through pregnancy removal. We never had sex as I stood my ground and then the next day he left telling me he was going away on a work trip for 7 weeks and wouldn't be able to contact me and naive me bought it. He took around 3 months to get back in contact and I lost it, flipped out via text and told him to never contact me again. I was a 22-year-old university student at the time and looking back, I can admit that I was incredibly naive. I had very little self-respect and I didn't have many expectations for myself or others. Since then, I've grown and matured a lot, but back then, naive is the best way to describe me. Perhaps I was unconsciously willing to overlook certain things, but I genuinely had no idea that this guy had a girlfriend at the time. In fact, he explicitly told me that he was single. I should add that this was in 2014. I moved on and met my husband and everything was going well. I had no contact with the guy from my past and started realizing the negative experiences he had put me through. Then, I decided to tell my husband about this guy and others I had been involved with. My husband, understanding my struggles with depression, asked me to block these guys and ensure they couldn't contact me. Over the years, we've been working on resolving my issues related to relationships and intimacy. I'm even on the waiting list for intensive counseling to focus on these areas. All seemed to be going fine until the end of September when my grandmother passed away. For some reason, I posted about it on Twitter and my affair partner reached out to me through private messages, expressing his condolences since he had lost his grandmother the previous year. Instead of being sensible and discussing this with my husband right away, I responded and things quickly spiraled out of control. We exchanged messages in which he told me I was the most amazing person he had ever met, how beautiful I was, and that he had always loved me. I made another significant mistake by apologizing for pushing him away, even though I hadn't, and expressing regret for not being better. I don't remember the exact words, but I've discussed most of it with my husband when he found out. My next big mistake was sending inappropriate photos to AP. He kept assuring me that he was there for me and that I could talk to him about anything. He seemed so glad that I was back in his life. During this time, things were getting worse with my husband. We were arguing more and I was becoming increasingly protective of my phone. I should mention that, as a way to help me with my mental health, my husband keeps an eye on my daily phone usage. I've had days where I would spend hours on my phone, neglecting my well-being and our marriage. My affair partner and I started meeting up and having physical affair during this period. I knew my husband often checked my phone, so I went out of my way to delete incriminating conversations and photos. About a few months later, my husband came to say goodnight and picked up my phone. He instantly asked, "Who's this?" That's when everything came crashing down and I got caught. I got caught because I was enjoying the attention and was happy to have this person back in my life, so I didn't go to my husband and tell him. I told him that our relationship was just emotional and the text conversation didn't reveal anything physical, so he wasn't aware to what the extent of the physical relationship, and I omitted the detail about having physical affair as I didn't want to hurt him. He told me it would have been much less hurtful if I had come to him at any point, and I truly wish I had. Honestly, I do. Initially, I got defensive and started blaming him, but since then, I have fully accepted all responsibility. I've told him as much as I can remember. However, I did leave out some details, such as the inappropriate photos I sent and how many times we were intimate. I did this to protect him from getting hurt. I want to be clear that I'm not trying to justify or make excuses for my actions. My husband didn't deserve what I did, and I still can't believe I may have jeopardized my marriage. He's really upset, and I'm not sure if he's going to leave me. As soon as my husband found out, I took immediate action. I deleted all access to AP, cutting all ties, and removed the social media accounts he used to contact me. My husband called AP right away, and AP quickly shifted blame onto me, saying it was all my fault. While I am definitely at fault, AP didn't take responsibility for his part, even though his messages showed otherwise. Initially, he made my husband believe it was solely my fault. I understand that my actions have consequences and I have indeed harmed my marriage. I agree that this way of thinking needs to change, but I'm uncertain about how to stop it. I don't want to solely blame him because he didn't force me to respond and he didn't make me send those photos. Those were decisions I made on my own and I deeply regret them. I think I'm just really angry with him. I recently found out that back then when I was 22 and, in the university, he lied about being in a relationship, so I believe he took advantage of me. It was a time when I was completely single and in a very vulnerable state, and I thought he was a friend I could trust. I don't think I'm any different from him now, but this happened 4 years ago, before I even knew my husband, and he told me he was single. Knowing now that was all a lie doesn't surprise me at all. I was naive and it took me years to realize that he had actually manipulated me. I agree that I accepted stuff that people with higher respect and confidence wouldn't accept. Although, part of my soul abuse was a very serious case of having my drink spiked, which is a 17 to 18-year-old I didn't know to look out for, so yes, I am angry at myself, angry that I let myself be used and put into dangerous situations that still hurt me and impact my marriage. As for the second time I slept with him, I was married to my husband. Absolutely, I am the sole party responsible, and you're right nowhere, and the vows didn't say that, and it makes me feel sick that I caved at that and that I gave him the opportunity. I should have mentioned earlier that my affair partner has a girlfriend whom he lives with. My affair partner really went to great lengths to hide everything. He blocked my husband on social media and took it a step further by taking his girlfriend's phone to block both my husband and me. The poor girl had absolutely no idea about any of this, and she might still not know if my husband hadn't taken action. My husband contacted my affair partner and told him that he knew who his partner was and that he had until the next day to tell her about it because she deserved to know. My affair partner tried to handle it on his own terms, but my husband essentially forced him to break the news to his partner, which was heartbreaking. She thanked my husband for making my affair partner tell her, and he also admitted that he had stolen her phone. This is when I learned something that has made me even angrier. My affair partner had been in a 6-year relationship with this girl the entire time. Yes, when he came to see me, he wasn't single. I can't believe that this guy messed me around all these years. Is it okay for me to feel angry and upset about this? I'm deeply in love with my husband and I will forever be sorry for what I've done. Right now, it feels like our marriage is on shaky ground because he feels betrayed by my actions. However, we are still living together in the same house and I hold on to hope that we can work through this. I've committed to improving myself and working on my mental health. Every day is a struggle as there are moments when he's loving and affectionate, but then he breaks down. We've thought about trying marriage counseling, but he's unsure if it can help us rebuild the trust he had for me. I feel devastated by what I've done to him and I'm terrified that he might realize he can't move past this. I also feel a strong sense of self-hatred and I constantly blame myself for what I've done. There shouldn't have been a reason for me to be angry at him, but I find myself snapping at him because he's afraid I might revert to my past behavior. The other day, I got upset with him because he mentioned that he believed there was more to the story than I was telling him. I realize that I tend to get snappy and defensive, and it's not just a reaction to being called out. It's something I've struggled with for a long time. Sometimes, yes, I still feel sorry for myself. I am genuinely remorseful and I am deeply sorry for what I did to my husband. I understand that it will take time to earn back his trust, so I've given him my phone and password. He wants me to share information that I've deleted, but there's nothing to recover because it has already been deleted. Pushing for it wouldn't help resolve anything. My husband believes that my emotional outbursts can be a bit childish, but it's mainly because I'm incredibly frustrated with the slow progress we're making. We haven't had a child together, so in a way, if our relationship doesn't work out, at least no child gets hurt. I really dislike being questioned and nobody wants to be seen as the one causing harm. Communication has never been my strong suit and I acknowledge that my betrayed husband hasn't been very patient with me so far. Often, I find myself formulating a response instead of genuinely listening to what he's trying to convey. I've said many hurtful things to him that I don't even remember saying. I've shouted a lot and refused to stop even when he told me he was triggered by our conversations. I've also wrongly blamed him for the affair, arguing that it could have been worse, and I've even accused him of never caring about me. I've said similar things in the past during my moments of depression, and it always takes time to repair the damage. But now, we're dealing with the added complication of my affair, which has eroded my husband's trust in me. He feels that my words and actions last night and most of today have undone some of the progress I had made in rebuilding our relationship. I'm truly disappointed in myself for letting my anger and frustration get the best of me, especially when my husband was having a tough day. As the one who had the affair, I know it's my responsibility to be the healer, not the one causing conflicts at 3 a.m. If anyone reading this has any advice on how I can work on myself to become a better person and partner, I would greatly appreciate it. I'm fully aware that my husband doesn't deserve this pain and he's in a very fragile state right now due to my actions. Did anyone else have a difficult time in the first few weeks after D-Day, which was about 2 weeks ago? Update: one evening, there was a knock on our door and a process server handed me divorce papers. This came as a shock because we were considering reconciling. A few hours later, he returned home and I confronted him for not personally giving me the papers. He revealed that he had recovered all the deleted messages from my phone and had seen everything. I tried explaining that I hadn't tried to hide anything. I deleted the messages to protect his mental well-being. He also told me that he didn't need to police me anymore and that he had spoken to his therapist, who allegedly said I was a burden on him. I doubted whether his therapist had really said that, and I thought he was being a coward by not taking responsibility for his actions. He claimed he could no longer trust me, even though that wasn't what he had been saying a few nights ago. I reminded him that we had agreed to work on our marriage, but he denied it and went ahead to file for divorce. He said he had barely slept more than 3 hours a night for the past 2 weeks since he found out about the affair and it was affecting his job. I told him that if he had agreed to marriage counseling, he might not be facing these issues now. I understand that the affair was my fault, but I feel like he didn't make an effort to work on our marriage. I'm really devastated right now because I don't know how I can go on without him. He has supported me with my mental health, sometimes at his own expense, and I truly feel abandoned. I'm hoping he might change his mind about the divorce. In the meantime, I'm looking deep within myself to understand the reasons behind my choices and to work on myself so I won't seek external attention from someone else to validate my self-worth, which ultimately cost me my marriage. It's a challenging and lengthy journey, but it's one I must undertake if I ever hope to. The wife, who seemed devoted and loving, was hiding a secret about her lover that ruined their world. She cheated on her husband, fulfilling her lover's every wish. But what happens when the deception is exposed and she is left alone, lost in her own lying games? This is a story of betrayal and consequences. James fell in love with his future wife as soon as he got a new job. He was 25 and Emily was 20. She was working part-time while studying at university. The girl didn't take her colleague seriously. For a long time she refused him even an ordinary date. But later she gave up and did not regret it. James turned out to be a wonderful man with whom there was something to talk about. In addition, he was handsome and attracted the attention of the female colleagues. A year later, Emily found out she was pregnant and later they had a beautiful baby girl whom her father adored. Neither of them noticed how 18 years flew by. Ever since Emily was a little girl, they had a friend, Viveka, who had been friends since kindergarten. And they managed to carry this friendship through the years into adulthood. Vika had been divorced for a long time. She was raising her son Callie on her own. He had just recently returned from the army and decided to make up for lost time by attending university. James was used to his wife going out with a friend several times a week. Then they went to the gym together. Then to the movies. Then just sat at home and drank. When their relationship just started, still young James did not understand why his beloved did not devote all her free time to him. He resented Emily, quietly hated Vika. But over the years he got used to their relationship. Emily joked with her husband, saying that he was just jealous that he had never had such friends and never would. James understood that, to some extent, this was true. Their daughter had left to study in another city right after high school. She had always dreamed of getting out of her small town. And when the opportunity presented itself, she fulfilled that dream. As her daughter grew older, Emily had more time for herself. She always looked good and James contributed to that in every way. He did not spare any money on his beloved. When the child became an adult, Emily started going to the gym for dancing and doing yoga. She visited beauty salons and spas more often than any other woman in her circle. The investment paid off handsomely. For her 40 years, Emily looked very attractive. It was this attractiveness that attracted the attention of Callie, Vicky's son. Emily came to visit them from work earlier than her friend and was greeted by a young man. They were drinking tea and suddenly Callie said, "You are very beautiful," a woman confused. It is one thing to hear such a thing from a husband or from men her own age. But another from a young man who knows a lot about youth and beauty. Emily was very pleased. "Thank you," she replied with a smile. "I remember when I was 14 years old, I like you very much. My first conscious love, you might say," the young man suddenly confessed. Goosebumps ran down Emily's back. Callie's confession made her feel uncomfortable. She felt as if she had become an unwitting witness to someone else's secret. She did not speak with him again. And she could not look him in the eye if she saw him again. She was embarrassed to admit even to herself that after that night, she constantly thought about Callie. She literally dreamed of the guy taking her with his strong hands and pressing his lips to hers. She went to see her friend less often. Emily began choosing times when Callie wasn't home. She was glad her friend didn't suspect anything, because she didn't want conflict with her. One day she did run into the young man and he, after getting a moment when her mother had retired to the balcony for a smoke, asked Emily directly if everything was all right. "Are you avoiding me?" said Callie. They were standing so close that it took the woman's breath away. "No, you seem to think I just have a lot of work to do. I can't come to you so often anymore," she answered confusedly. Her lips stretched in an attempt to smile. Callie looked at her sternly with a kind of concern. It was obvious that the guy was nervous. The next moment made everything turn over in Emily's soul. There were butterflies in her stomach and her cheeks lit up with fire. Her friend's son kissed her, and she couldn't push him away. A week later, Callie called Emily and offered to come to him. His mother was out of town, and he was home alone. Upon hearing this suggestion, the woman became angry, yelled at him, and hung up. For a long time she sat there, clutching the phone in her hands and breathing heavily. Did he really think she was going to drop everything and run to his bed? That day Emily got off work early and an hour later was standing in front of Callie, who opened the door for her with a pleased look. Their meetings became a regular occurrence. Emily had a whole spectrum of feelings. She was worried about her relationship with her friend, which would definitely fall apart if she found out about it with Callie. She was ashamed of James, who naively thought she was being held up at work, when in fact she was basking in the strong arms of a young man, and she was searingly and passionately in love with her lover. Often they didn't get to see each other, and Emily tried to keep their dates in the afternoon on her lunch hour, so that James didn't suspect a thing. His wife tried her best to act as if nothing was going on. James, on the other hand, began to see that his wife was starting to look even better. Her eyes glittered and her manners changed. He admired Emily without knowing what these changes were connected with. Once lying in bed after another intimacy, Callie told his beloved, "Divorce your husband. Let's go somewhere together. I want to be with you." He was admiring Emily, and she saw it. "Well, yes, and your mother will kill us." The woman laughed, "And we won't tell her." After dialogues like that, Emily always wanted to break up with Callie, never to see him again or remember what happened between them. She and James had been together for almost 20 years, and she couldn't imagine life without her husband. Despite her feelings for her husband's lover, Emily loved him too and couldn't give him up. But their secret union could not exist happily ever after. Once again, when Emily ran away from work to fall into the arms of her lover, Vika caught them in bed. From what she saw, the woman felt ill, and her son had to hurriedly call his mother an ambulance. Shocked, Vika kept repeating the same thing. How could you do this? She looked at her friend with sad eyes, while Emily cried and begged for forgiveness. Callie sat silently in the kitchen, trying not to show his face to the women. He heard his mother say that Emily had to tell James everything, or she would. And the mistress cried and begged her not to. The cheater had to confess. She did not want James to hear about it from a third party, and pulling together the strength, told him everything. He at first didn't believe it, thinking his wife was playing a practical joke on him, but when he saw the tears in her eyes, he understood everything. They decided to save their marriage, they are family, they have a daughter. But after a difficult year full of scandals and resentments, they divorced. Emily's soul missed her beloved, and James could not even bring himself to go to the same bed with his wife. The daughter accepted their divorce. But the relationship between her mother and her peer was not. The woman was left hoping that, after a while, the girl would change her mind and resume communication with her mother. Callie transferred to a university in another city, and she and Emily moved away from their acquaintances and angry tongues. In the shadow of forbidden passions and hidden desires, fate gently wove her formidable net, drawing her into the arms of a dark conspiracy. The wife, surrounded by glittering illusions of her perfect marriage, suddenly plunged into a dangerous game of fate and began to cheat on her husband. But what happens when the curtain rises and the illusions dissipate, leaving her alone, broken and betrayed? In the following stunning tale of betrayal and experience, she will find the strength to rise up, pick up the pieces of her shattered life, and be reborn in all her greatness. Life in the quiet little village is always monotonous. There are no bright impressions, everything seems to go on as if on a rolling basis. The villagers got used to each other a long time ago and have been pairing off since school. There is not much of a choice. They get married, have children, spend their old age, and then marry their children again, and everything goes in a circle. There is no news either, unless someone arranges it for himself. And the main event in my remote village was the sensational news that they will build a new factory. There was a lot of gossip talk. Few people believed in construction, but one summer evening trucks with building materials rumbled past. Machinery rumbled and a construction crew came. It was that day that changed my life forever. We were used to living in the middle of nowhere, in silence and complete peace. My wife, with her emotional and hot-tempered nature, had reconciled herself to the fact that no bright impressions were forthcoming. I did everything a husband should do, earn money, and help in the household. In the village I am a reliable, strong, and hard-working man. She, like a cheerful dragonfly, was not very fond of work. But dreaming was hers. Dreamed of a city, of impressions, travel, and that I was ideal. Even at the beginning of our married life, Annie tried to diversify our life. She was having fun. But I was tired at work and could not reciprocate the mutual merriment. I was afraid to go into the city, in order not to get involved in some interesting story, and also in order to save the family budget. So our family evenings were peaceful and quiet. However, on a quiet summer evening was the beginning of construction, where I saw him. It was the construction foreman who won her heart. I worked from morning till night, was tired, and didn't notice how my spouse was distancing herself. Without realizing it herself, I started going out into the yard more often to do garden work. But that was just the reason. The construction crew, whose foreman was Nikita, was clearly visible from behind a low fence. In the daytime, I would put on a cheeky sundress and go out to the yard to sunbathe and look at Nikita. He couldn't help but notice it. The girl's passion could no longer sit inside. She needed to attract his attention. So she put on short shorts. A top, made a mischievous ponytail on her head, took a hose, and began to water the flowers. The effect was not long in coming. Nikita immediately walked over to the fence and a conversation ensued. "Does the construction noise bother you?" No, not at all. My wife became embarrassed. I do not pay attention to him. Very sweet and even coquettishly smiled and made it clear that she was interested in him. It was from that day that something broke in my wife. Deep sighs of regret burst from her chest. I did not understand what was wrong with her. When I asked her questions, she would answer that everything was fine. When I came home from work, I would automatically receive a kiss on the cheek and go to dinner. She understood that she was attracted to Nikita, and she could not overcome this desire. A few days later, Nikita asked E&I to show her where the stores were. She offered to go with him by car. But of course, she was very afraid of the trip. She understood that it was only a pretext, because she saw in Nikita's eyes the same fire of passion that had ignited in herself. But E&I went. When she first drove outside the village, the foreman turned off the car, pulling into the shade of the trees. And there she was, already feeling his hot breath on her neck. And so shy, E&I became bold and passionate, falling into Nikita's arms. And so the 2 summer months passed. When I left for work, my wife would meet Nikita's gaze. And later, they would drive together to the woods, where they would give themselves over to love. She couldn't think about anything else. And I began to notice her coldness and aloofness. Already lying in the arms of this foreman, E&I wondered what to do about it now. How to tell me the truth? Nikita promised to take her to town. He described in every color how they would live together and get married. The summer flew by. Construction was coming to an end, and E&I was making plans to move to the city. She wanted to go somewhere where emotion and fun beckoned to her. And with Nikita by her side, it would be unspeakable happiness. The construction was finished, and it was time for the young slave to return to the city. E&I was waiting for a chance to confess to me, but Nikita stopped her. Sweetheart, I can't take you with me right away. I have some things to take care of, but I'll come and get you. But how can I be here without you? We'll keep in touch, and I'll be back very soon, and we'll leave together. And he left, and E&I stopped sleeping at night. She didn't want to eat anything, didn't want to see anyone, and I saw that and felt that I simply disgusted her. A week went by, but Nikita still didn't call. And then I began to notice that my wife was throwing up in the morning. And soon I saw a test in a garbage bag with 2 lines on it. I did not want to believe it, but E&I constantly cried and did not eat anything. Immediately, I decided to find out once and for all. And my wife confessed, told me in all the colors of his adultery, and even began to point out my shortcomings. I was furious and slapped in the face. It became clear that the child is not mine, but still did not want to believe in betrayal. But I was possessed by rage. I grabbed my wife and threw her out into the courtyard, threw a few things into her suitcase, followed her, and closed the door. The grief-stricken girl walked down the street, and the fellow villagers looked after her. Many guessed about the young lady's violent shenanigans, but no one offered to help. Waiting for the bus, E&I went into town. She did not know Nikita's address, but she knew the name of a construction firm. She arrived in the city late at night and had to spend the night at the train station. In the morning, E&I went in search of her beloved. She found the firm fairly quickly. Nikita was there. He was surprised to see her, took her outside and led her away from the building. He was very angry. Why did you come here? I came to see you. You promised that we would. E&I, I'm married. I have a family and a life of my own. With you, I was only having fun. But we're having a baby. I don't want it. Get an abortion, or tell your husband it's his baby. He kicked me out. He knows everything. I don't want to know anything. Bye. If you interfere in my family or seek a meeting, I'll go to the police. Nikita left, and E&I sat down on the bench and sobbed. She still had no idea what to do. She didn't know anyone in town, and no one wanted her, and in the village life had come to a standstill. Money was enough for a communal room. The next day, the girl went in search of a job. She found a job at a hairdresser's as a cleaner. She worked during the day, but at night, she wept on her pillow and thought of her bitter fate. Anything always wanted to get out into the city, but not under these circumstances, and not at this price. I received a letter from my ex-wife in which she told me everything, apologized, and asked me not to file for divorce. But my decision was unchanged. After the divorce, she never contacted me again. And how is her life now? I do not know. Yes, and no. My wife, 42 female, and I, 48 male, were married for 14 years. We never had any children, but that's not to say we didn't try. She was a manager at Kmart, and I worked in a shipping warehouse. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt like we belonged with each other and our work crew. We had a routine and friends like family that I wouldn't have traded for the world. We were always honest, talkative, attentive, and considerate of each other. Our sense of humor was pretty dark. We liked watching and reading things online that would make other people squeamish. We also thought it was super funny when we ripped on each other and our friends thought we were seriously fighting. People from our apartment building would take turns cooking on the grill for the rest of us for a giant cookout. One day, the grill was moved to a different spot and caught a tree on fire. It spread to roof of the building and down all in a matter of minutes. Thankfully, everyone survived, but my wife and I passed out and had to be rescued by a volunteer firefighter before the fire trucks even arrived. We were taken to the hospital for asphyxiation from smoke inhalation. I was discharged 2 weeks before my wife, because she wasn't able to cover her mouth and nose like I did while I searched for her. It's impossible to see in smoke like that, so I started choking before I found her. While my wife recovered, she was conscious, but she needed special attention and respiratory treatment. I noticed one doctor that seemed to care very deeply about my wife. He was handsome and charming, which irritated me. My wife smiled at him, and they looked into each other's eyes very intently when they mostly him spoke. When I started staying by my wife's side, the doctor told me he was the one to receive her that day in the ER, and he'd been looking after her ever since. I didn't know how to respond. I wanted my wife to get the care she needed, but I didn't like this guy. He seemed to think too highly of himself and think he could take my wife if he wanted to. When he helped her stand up, he put his arm around her waist and held her close. She took her time moving when he was like that. I was struggling with my thoughts at this point. She didn't really need help walking, did she? My wife could barely speak, but she seemed smitten with the doctor and emotionally strained when she looked at me. She never said anything really alarming, but it was clear something had changed. We had a near-death experience, and that does change people, but I didn't want to believe my wife, and I wouldn't make it through this together unchanged. When it was time for her to be discharged, she hesitated to go home. She asked if she could stay in the hospital longer, which gave the doctor the opportunity to offer her follow-up visits at her home. I was very suspicious and didn't think it was all in my head anymore. I thought about objecting, but decided not to. I imagined how bad and weird it would look for me to deny my wife doctor visits. Even if he was pushing boundaries, I'd look like the bad guy. I couldn't believe he so easily agreed to make house visits. This was something a person with much less qualifications could have done, so I was positive it was because he at least wanted to visit my wife, if not more. The very first doctor visit was at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Of course, I was at work. I texted my wife at 9:10 to ask if he was there and how it was going. She didn't reply, so I started to wonder what was going on. I felt like a shell of a person walking around the warehouse. 2 hours later, I still heard nothing from her. Coworkers approached me, concerned for my well-being because I was pale and clammy. At 11:25, I was pulling into her driveway. I drove recklessly to get there as fast as I could after I got permission from my boss. I noticed his luxury vehicle and that the front door was locked, which was unusual for when we had a visitor. As I walked up the stairs, I heard them. Our dresser was pinning the bedroom door open against the wall because privacy was never a concern of ours. When I got there, I just dropped to my knees. I had no control over my body. The doctor leaped up and scrambled to get his pants on, flushed and angry. My wife covered herself with blankets, yelling helplessly as I rose to my feet and started throwing punches. It was the loudest I heard her since before the fire, and it made my blood run cold. She wasn't the woman I married anymore. Something made her change and let this man screw up her emotions. After I got in a few punches in my adrenalized state, the doctor must have realized what a dire and unprofessional situation he was in, because he stumbled down the stairs, got to his car, and drove off. In the bedroom, my wife apologized profusely and pleaded for me to forgive her, but I just screamed no and called her names that accurately described what she did. Of course, when I said cheater, she tried to say I stopped them, so it didn't count. She failed to understand that trying to seduce him with her eyes and gestures in the hospital and making out with him in the nude still counted as cheating. At first, I was worried he was going to press charges against me, and it would be my word against his, but nothing happened for months. I tried to get the doctor fired, but it didn't work because nothing was captured on camera and he hadn't told anyone he was making a house call. Plus, he had expensive lawyers that would pin all the blame on me for causing him injuries. My wife left pitiful voicemails on my phone, but when she realized I couldn't stand to look at her, she continued seeing the doctor, even before our divorce was final. I ended up kicking her out of the house, and a week later she posted that she was in a relationship with him. It made me sick. Life really seemed cruel, unfair, and without reason at this point. Thankfully, that's when it all started to turn around. She moved in with the doctor, who wasn't going to hand her money to help with the divorce aftermath. It didn't take long before AP realized what a mess she was and dumped her, kicking her to the curb when she had nothing else. She was so defeated, she didn't even try to get me to let her back in. Her sister let her move in, since she was exceptionally depressed after screwing up her whole life with me. My ex calls me occasionally, saying she misses me and would give anything in the world to have another chance at being my wife. She sort of blames the fire at our apartment for screwing up her head and making her think she felt things for the doctor when it was just survivor thankfulness. I didn't believe a word she said. For all I knew, she wouldn't be saying any of that to me if it weren't for AP leaving her. OP, I am so sorry your wife cheated on you with her doctor. It most likely was because her emotions of recovery influenced her to do something she hadn't done before. Emotions are not as big and powerful as what people think. With maturity, practice, and self-control, anyone can manage their emotions and do what's right. If denying the temptation bothers them that much, they should wait 72 hours after rejoining their spouse before deciding to talk to them about it. This conversation could end the relationship, since there's temptation, but at least there's a chance some sense could be talked into the tempted one and the two of you could grow stronger. You did the right thing by separating from her after stopping them. That's the only way to get a clear head and realize you're going to be okay without that person in your life. It takes strength and courage to part from people that have hurt us, but it is better to stand on your own for a while than with a traitor. Thanks for sharing with us. Now let's move on to our next story for the day. At the time of this story, my wife was 26 and I was 25. We were getting along fine, married for 3 years, together for 6. Ironically, one of the things that attracted me to her the most was her maturity. She usually thought through any big life decisions very carefully. Like what college she went to, haircuts she tried, and most importantly, when she wanted to have kids. Her parents raised her to think things through, but they were never very good with money. Her grandmother was the one to put her through college. So in her 3rd year of marriage, we had debt from my schooling and some of hers, and she still hadn't landed a job in her field. What she was working wasn't paying well at all, so a lot of the strain was on me. I could tell she felt bad, but I didn't know she was about to make a big decision without talking to me first. She decided to sell her car and met a potential buyer on a Monday while I was at work. He was very excited about it, but he couldn't drive it home until the weekend. So to reserve it, he paid her in full cash. She gave him a bill of sale, dated, signed, and notarized. However, she continued driving the car, and I didn't realize she'd sold it. She mentioned over dinner that she really loved her car, and then she broke down into tears. That's when she explained it all to me and added that she'd spent half of his cash on our bills and debt payments. I was pretty upset with her, and I told her she'd probably have to sell her car to him since we couldn't pay him back his money. Her face was deflated but accepted facts. She screwed up by selling a car she loved and needed, but she had to follow through now. I was at work on Saturday when my wife said the buyer was coming to get the car. She didn't respond to me while he was there, so that made me worry. I checked the live feed of our security camera out front. I only saw a guy, crew cut, standing in the driveway with the cars, but I rewound it a little and saw that the buyer had arrived with a crew cut to help drive the cars home. When my wife talked to him, it seemed like she was giving him bad news. He waved his arms around and rubbed his head like she was stressing him out. Just when it looked like he was threatening to sue her, she got him to quiet down and lean close to her so she could whisper something. She didn't know the camera didn't record audio. Instantly, his face softened and he smiled. He looked so surprised and happy with whatever she said. He glanced at the camera as my wife took him by the hand and led him around to the back of the house where we didn't have cameras. Crew Cut just waited awkwardly in the driveway for several minutes. I was already driving home, furious. By the time I got there, the men and their car were gone. My wife's car was still there. She greeted me warmly as if everything was fine until she saw the anger in my eyes. I shoved past her to the backyard where I searched our patio furniture for any signs of foul play. Stuff looked moved around, but I couldn't find anything. I looked across the yard and noticed that our neighbor had a backyard camera that covered our yard too. I knocked on their door and after hearing my story, they invited me in and recovered the footage for me. They watched the video with me the first time of my wife having sex with the guy on the patio, just like I pictured. I walked towards my wife, standing helplessly worried in the backyard. She knew what I was doing and that our marriage could be over. As soon as I started playing her the video, she dropped to her knees. She didn't want to see it and tried saying she was sorry over and over again, as if that would make it all go away. I told her I hated her for what she did to me. I started my life with her, accepting her past and life as my responsibility, and I managed to keep her safe and happy, only for her to end it all by sleeping with someone to pay off a debt. It was low and desperate and she didn't need to do it. I told her to own up to her decision and follow through with selling the car. She went behind my back and lied more than once. My heart was broken. She told me she didn't see any other way out of it because she felt like she needed her car and his money. Then she kind of bragged by saying she offered him half his money back, but he said her skills paid him back in full. I packed my stuff while she cried and talked about how our bills were paid, so I should be happy and forget anything happened. I went to stay with my coworker. It was awkward and it made me feel lost. I had to find my packed toothbrush and toothpaste, and while digging through my bag of belongings, I found a pair of my wife's undies. It made me grieve for my loss. She fought me tooth and nail in court, even trying to claim that I was abusive and she was desperate to fall in love again. It was nothing like what you'd expect a woman to say to a judge. Since she couldn't prove anything and I had her cheating on film, she was ordered to leave the house. I sold it and started my life over in a different state, where I was offered twice my previous salary for doing the same amount of work. I know I lucked out and most infidelity victims aren't so lucky, but I wanted people to know that even when I felt that heart pang at my wife's clothing mixed with mine, I didn't run back to her. I deserved a chance at genuine love with someone else, and I actually found it in my new home state of Connecticut. OP, what your wife did was extremely low and it shows that she didn't think very highly of herself or the vows she took to remain loyal to you. It's hard to imagine why she didn't talk to you about selling her car in the first place or at least think it through. You did the right thing by checking the camera and going home to figure out what was happening, and as hard as it was to leave her there, feeling so remorseful, it was the right thing for you. After a spouse has committed adultery, it's a good idea to take some days away from them without contact. They've already cheated, so keeping an eye on them is only going to stress you out and make you more desperate to save the relationship instead of realizing you're okay without someone who's willing to do this to you. She made a very, very poor decision that the relationship couldn't recover from all because she didn't talk to her spouse first about what she was thinking. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Everything between me and my wife, 31 female, seemed perfect on the outside. We have been together since high school. It was like something out of a romantic comedy. She was the nerdy girl who spent her lunch periods in the library, and I was the football player. Even though historically we would have never spent time together, she and I ended up falling for each other. Right after college, we ended up getting married so we could move forward and start our lives together. We bought our first house very young, we both scored very nice jobs, and we started planning to have kids. Fast forward 3 years and we have one son and another baby on the way. In high school, my wife had a friend who had always rubbed me the wrong way. It was so obvious that he had a thing for her, but she constantly insisted that he was just nice. I tried to explain to her that it made me uncomfortable when she spent a lot of time with him because it was clear to me that he liked her and didn't care that she and I were happily married. Whenever I would bring it up, it would always cause an argument, so eventually I gave up. They talked on the phone all the time, they would always be texting each other and sending memes, and they had a ton of little inside jokes that I always felt like I was on the outside of. He didn't attend the same college as us, but they reconnected after graduation when we all moved back to our hometown. As it turned out, he was studying in the same field as her, so they were able to land a job at the same company. My wife didn't have a ton of friends in high school, so when she made a lot of friends at her new job, she was very excited. She was buddy-buddy with a lot of the girls in the office, and they would go to brunches, theater, and they would even have sleepovers on occasion. I was really happy for her because I knew she was looking for a group like that for so long, and part of me thought she would be spending less time with her male best friend. Last winter, I started to notice the difference in how she interacted with him. She didn't talk to him as often, or at least I didn't see them talking as much. He stopped coming over to the house, and I only saw him on occasion when I would visit the office. I was hopeful that she had outgrown him and they were finally parting ways. One day my wife came to me and told me that a bunch of the girls from the office were planning a girls' trip for the weekend. She told me it would be harmless fun, just drinking some wine and talking while they relaxed with their face masks. She left Friday evening and I stayed at home with the kids. I genuinely hadn't thought anything was wrong. Saturday evening rolls around and I'm in bed searching through Netflix looking for something to watch when my phone rings. It was a phone call for her male best friend. Right away, I thought it was strange because he and I had never really been close, so him calling me was bizarre. I answered the phone and waited for him to say something, but he never did. I was about to hang up the phone when I heard a part of the conversation they were having. He was telling my wife how much he loved her. My wife was on the other line as well. Wherever she had gone for the weekend, he had gone as well. I absolutely could not put down the phone while I listened. She told him that she regretted what they had done a few weeks ago and that last night was a mistake. She had gone there to have a conversation with him and end everything. It was then that I realized there never was a girls' trip. They continued their conversation until I could hear them kissing on the other line, then I finally hung up. I couldn't believe what I just heard. I felt sick to my stomach and I wanted to scream, but I couldn't do anything to upset my children. At first I thought it was such an odd time to be but dialed by him. The more I thought about it, people only but dialed their recent contacts, so it didn't make sense for him to have accidentally called me. He did it on purpose. He called me while he had that conversation, hoping I would overhear it. About an hour passed, then I got the text messages. They were all from him. They were screenshots of conversations, pictures they had sent each other, and even a clip from a video that he had taken at the lake house they were staying in. I was absolutely shocked. It was the last thing I wanted to see, but I was glad he sent it. I didn't say anything back. He probably thought that he had won this imaginary fight that he and I have been having for the past 10 years, but I would find a way to make them both pay. I sat on the information, stewing in all of the ideas that I had to get revenge on them both. I knew that I wanted to get them fired, but that didn't seem like punishment enough. My wife came back Sunday night and couldn't even meet my eyes. She felt guilty for what she did, as she should have. By the end of the week, she would only feel worse. I pretended like nothing happened, not wanting to stir the pot and upset our children any more than they would be after everything. Their well-being was my priority, which apparently she didn't care too much about. On Wednesday, I was able to get a meeting with her boss. Her company had a strict no dating within the workplace rule, so I knew at the very least they would both be reprimanded for that. The real kicker in all of it was that one of the pictures my wife's friend sent me was of them together in the break room. I had attended many company Christmas parties in the past, so I recognized it well. Her boss was horrified when she saw the images of them together. No doubt she was thinking about how she drank her coffee at the table they screwed on. Now I knew my wife and I knew her well. I was certain she had no clue her friend sent me any of the information that he did. When she found out what he did, she would want nothing to do with him. His little power play cost him any chance he had of being with her after our separation. As soon as I stepped out of the office, I watched her boss storm over to her friend and practically drag him into the office. I went right over to my wife's desk and I dropped an envelope with all of the printed documents I had been sent alongside divorce papers. She had one of those open offices that didn't like to use cubicles or box their workers, and so everybody got a good view when I served her the papers. I told her that I wanted a divorce, then with my voice raised higher than it normally would be I told her I knew everything about her affair with her friend. I watched the women around her raise their eyebrows and hurriedly look away as if they couldn't hear anything. My wife's face was as red as a tomato, she was so embarrassed. I walked out of the office knowing that she was likely about to get fired for what happened in the break room. I took the kids to my brother's house and we stayed with him for a few weeks while I looked for another apartment. She and I are officially divorced, but we're still going through custody hearings for the children. We have agreed on joint custody, but the biggest issue is figuring out the holiday schedule. She and her friend were both fired, and from what I understand she has completely cut him off. She moved back in with her mom and I ended up selling the house that I got to keep. OP, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Her friend's intentions were always clear to you from the start, and it's such a shame that she wouldn't listen to you. Setting up clear boundaries between the two of them could have prevented the fallout of your marriage, but it seems like she might have had lingering feelings for him too. The worst part of all of this is that she didn't even have the courage to tell you about the affair. He only called to hurt you. You're right that it does seem like some sick power play on his end. I really hope you were able to move on from this and find someone else more worth the time and effort. Now let's move on to our next story. I, 26 male, met my ex 25 female in college, but we didn't date right away. We ended up running into each other after graduation and hooking up. She and I had been running in the same circles, but we weren't close by any means in college. After running into her, I did admit that I had a bit of a crush on her at some point, and she told me that she felt the same way. Things were good with us for a while. We had been together for 3 years when I popped the question and asked her to be my wife. She was beyond excited and told me that she wanted nothing more than to be my wife. We hadn't been living together at the time. She was on a lease with a roommate and she didn't want to abandon her. After our engagement, she slowly started moving things over so she could officially live with me when her lease was up. She spent most of her nights at my apartment anyway, so it made sense. Every now and then she would crash at her apartment if she was super exhausted from work or if she had to get up extra early. She told me she did that just so she wouldn't disturb me when she got up and did her whole makeup routine to get ready. As much as I wished she was at my apartment, I didn't really mind that much since she was only a few blocks away. What I didn't know at the time was that she was using her old room as a place to film for her OnlyFans. I didn't even know she had an OnlyFans. She didn't have the best job when I met her. She was making about $16 an hour and she was being worked to the bone. She would constantly be complaining about terrible coworkers, the things she had to do, and how exhausted she was at the end of every day. It took me a little while to notice, but she stopped complaining about all of that. Not only was she not telling me about her work day, she suddenly had all of this money to throw into our wedding. She wanted designer dresses, the nicest venue, premium organic food, you name it. I told her I had no idea how we were going to afford her dream wedding, but she just kept telling me that we would figure it out. I found out about her account by complete coincidence. Realistically, there was probably some algorithm that brought me to this. My girlfriend looked like my dream girl, so most of the pictures I would look at online were of women who looked very similar. I was scrolling through some Twitter comments and I saw one of those ads for an OnlyFans account nested within them. It wasn't from her account, it was from somebody's account that just listed a bunch of different models to get views. I had to do a double take when I scrolled past it to make sure it really was her. I was 100% certain that the woman in the video I saw was my fiancé. Now there's no shame in having these accounts and making money from them. Honestly, if they can hustle doing that, then good for them, but I wished I would have known that my girlfriend had one herself. I'm a pretty traditional guy and I don't love the idea of other men online seeing my girlfriend completely naked doing God only knows what. Of course I had to click on the account to see what was happening. I paid $14 for a month's subscription so I could see for myself what she was posting. For the most part it was all stuff she was doing by herself. I recognized right away that it was in her old apartment, so it finally made sense why she was so hesitant to leave. I didn't like that she was doing this, and at the very least I wished she'd told me. I thought maybe we could have a conversation about it and I could convince her to delete it. It wasn't worth throwing away our future. At least I thought that until I saw a collaboration she did with another creator. They were in her room and there was a full video of her having sex with some random man. The more I scrolled, the more content of the two of them that I found. It looked like they had filmed 10 videos together and had taken countless photos. All of her subscribers loved it and were asking for more of them together. I scrolled back further and found another collaboration with a woman that I recognized as her roommate. I was shocked by all of it, but I couldn't look away. I didn't understand why she would open an account without speaking to me about it, and how could she so casually cheat on me on the account. I couldn't stay at home and see her, so I crashed at my buddy's place and talked to him about it. He helped talk me down and figure out what I should do. We both came up with the idea of ruining her account. I still had my subscription, so we commented on a post pretending to be another hot girl and invited a bunch of her subscribers to watch an Instagram live of us. Of course, a bunch of them jumped at the opportunity. When I had enough people, I explained what happened, telling all of those men that she had cheated on me and kept the entire account a secret. A lot of them didn't like that because she was pretending to be this nice sweetheart when she spoke to them. They felt like she was lying to them, so they canceled their subscriptions. My fiancé found out and came to confront me at my friend's house when she saw that I wasn't home. We had a huge argument and she tried to explain to me that she was doing it for us so we could have a nice wedding. I just told her that the wedding was off and explained that she needed to get her things out of my apartment. She tried to convince me not to leave her, but I had no interest in being with her after what I'd seen. We ended up officially breaking up and calling off the wedding. She's continued using her OnlyFans. Apparently, the guy she had collaborated with had a girlfriend who didn't know about the videos they made. She dumped him and posted a video explaining what happened, and his account tanked too. I was glad that my video could help her see the truth. OP, I can't believe you had to go through that. Creating an account on something like that is something you should disclose to your partner. From the sound of it, you would have definitely done whatever you could to give your fiancé her dream wedding. It's such a shame she would go behind your back like that. Her hiding the account was bad enough without secretly sleeping with another man for content. They had agreed to film together several times. That goes far beyond a one-time collaboration. The two of them must have had some other kind of connection. I'm glad you were able to break away from her, and I'm glad your story was able to help another person in a similar situation. I wish you well, and I hope you can recover from this. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. My fiancé, Adam, has 4 kids from his former partners, twin daughters, preschoolers, another daughter, pre-tween, and a son, preschooler. I have a daughter, kindergartner. He would treat all the kids the same till the wedding planning came. He picked his son as the ring bearer and his 3 daughters as flower girls, but had no role for my daughter. I asked if we could add her to be a flower girl just like her stepsisters, but he refused without explaining. He just kept it short, saying no. My daughter heard the girls talking about it and said she wanted to be the flower girl as well, and I brought it up with Adam again. He told me 3 was enough to be flower girls and that there was no spot left for my daughter. I said we could make them 4 and add my daughter. Why not? He said it wouldn't work for some reason. I insisted, and he suddenly snapped and told me it was not a huge deal for me to be so worked up like this. I said my daughter wishes to be among the flower girls and wear and do what they do, and his daughters aren't somehow superior to mine. He gave me a nasty stare and said, "Ha, so this is what it's all about," then told me I was being ridiculous and quite toxic with this my child your child mentality. He insisted that he treats all the kids the same and that he can't believe I'd questioned that over some nonsensical issue as the flower girl. We had a full-blown argument, and he said I was acting immaturely by insisting on making this a big deal and choosing it as a hill to die on. Am I the idiot for choosing this hill to die on, or am I being unreasonable? For those who are confused about the age of his twin daughters and son, he got both of his exes pregnant at the same time, take or give a few months. He divorced his first ex, then went on to marry the second ex, then later divorced her. Let me get this straight. In the span of 4 to 5 years, this man has gotten his first wife pregnant, cheated on his first wife, possibly while she was pregnant, got the mistress pregnant, divorced the first wife, married the mistress, divorced the mistress, dated and proposed to you successfully? Busy guy. OP, prepare to be cheated on. He has a pattern. Now he's being mean to your daughter for an unspecified reason. Not the idiot. Die on this hill and reevaluate if he's worth marrying. Seriously, just that small bit of history she shared about him would make me run and is a giant red flag. She definitely shouldn't marry this man. He got 2 women pregnant simultaneously, and this is the dude you want to marry? Marry some self-esteem and save your daughter the therapy. Grab your daughter and run. Do not marry this man. If this is how he treats your daughter now, how will he treat her after the wedding? There are 4 little girls. If 4 is too many, then there should only be 2, one of his and one of yours. Why should his 3 get to be a part of the wedding, but your only daughter is not? Why do you not have any say in your wedding? Will you have any say in any decisions after the wedding? Yeah, he's showing you who he is, and your daughter will always come second to his kids. And in what world does he get to make all the wedding decisions anyway? Please, for your and your daughter's sake, break this off. How is this not enough for you to blow off the engagement? What would you say if your daughter, as an adult, brought someone like him home as a partner? Hey mom, this is Greg. He got someone pregnant while he was with his pregnant wife. Then he divorced his wife, married his mistress, then divorced her too. But I want to marry him. Geez, it makes you wonder why his other baby mamas left. This is an absolute example of gaslighting, and he does it knowingly and deliberately. You haven't said how long you two have been together, but given his previous relationships and timelines, it can't be more than a couple of years. The honeymoon phase of your relationship can't be far from over. And now he's showing you who he truly is. He hasn't learned anything from his 2 failed marriages, and doesn't value you or your child. Don't make the biggest mistake of your life. Walk away now. Recently, I, female 26, have won quite a lot of money in the lottery. It's not the main prize, it was one of the top 3 though, but it's a life-changing amount in my country. I grew up poor, very poor, and while I worked my way up, my closest family still struggles. I help, but I can't fix everything. Well, I couldn't before. My winnings were recently deposited into my bank account, completely separate from my normal one. I'm not touching that money until I have my meeting with the financial advisors that I hired. I plan to use a small amount of money to enjoy and use part to improve my family's life, e.g. buy them flats that they can later on afford to upkeep, but in a safer place and of better quality. Then invest the vast majority in a different venture to ensure revenue for years to come, so that I can live comfortably and help my family. The only people that know are my closest family and my boyfriend, Andy, 30. We've been together for 7 months, but we don't live together. Andy has different plans. He came up with a list of items he needs, and has been pressuring me to get them before I even speak to my advisors. Basically, he wants a new car, stereotypically. He wants something like a Tesla, which he doesn't need. He wants us to move in together, and for me to buy a house with a pool. He's now started talking about kids, blah blah, even though he knows that I'm child-free. I've been refusing every single request, telling him that necessities come first, and that money should be under lock and key until I speak with my financial advisors. Naturally, he's not very happy. He's been calling me a Scrooge, telling me I don't love him anymore, calling me a cheapskate. Worst of all, he now told every one of our friends about this, and they've started pressuring me as well, asking me to fund nights out, etc., and they've been very cruel when I refuse, idiot being almost a compliment. I'm devastated. Am I really an idiot in this situation? Am I the idiot for not wanting to spend frivolously? Not the idiot. Unfortunately, your boyfriend now sees you as an ATM, not a girlfriend. It's not you. It's a sudden influx of money that shows people's true colors. He and your friends will not leave you alone. They will suck you dry of the money and then dump you. I would dump him and block them, then move ASAP. You need new friends. Oh, and you've only been together 7 months? Just 7 months, and he just makes demands? Daddy also spread the news of your win. He behaves as if it's his money. Well, I bet he thinks it is his money. It would be best if you ended it. He just sees the money, and he doesn't care about you anymore. Keep the money safe and unload the boyfriend. He'll only get worse. Han, you do not deserve this. He's cunning and selfish. When you would not comply, he told your friends something you didn't want. His tactics will increase and expand if you don't set a boundary or cut him off. You deserve someone who respects your wishes and is a supportive partner. Congrats. Winnings usually amplify the worst in people's character. Stay true to yourself or you'll regret it. Just my 2-cent advice. Since you sound like a generous person, if I was in your shoes, I'd start figuring out who's sincerely asking for help, and who's asking for what they want and will always want more. I also wouldn't buy my family houses, because they might want more and more, and you'll only get scorned from them for not doing more, even if you give in to them until you're bankrupt. Good luck, because life is gonna change. I, 29 male, had a kid, my daughter, with my ex-wife, 32, 10 years ago. And there's no real way to sugarcoat this. But as soon as she was born, I left, and I never ended up seeing her in the hospital as a baby. I was never really present in her life at any point, but I ended up getting a divorce 11 months later, with her getting full custody, of course. I married young, was really stupid, and thought I'd end up being a good dad, despite having no skills. But I got scared that I'd turn out like my dad and chickened out. Not really an excuse, but an explanation, I guess. I paid child support for the first 3 years, but stopped afterward. I've been speaking with the girl's mother about reconnecting with her, but she thinks I should stay out of their lives. But I think making amends is always possible, so I'm not sure. I want to make things right, but I will respect their decision. I've seen her a few times, but her mother's always introduced me as a friend. She says she will tell him when she's ready. I've been dating a girl, 28, for about 10 months, and I really like her. I think I could see a life for us. And I know that sounds weird, but she's also said the same. I also spoke to my daughter's mother about meeting this girl, but she says absolutely not, and that's a bad idea. But if I want to reintroduce her into my life, isn't it fair that she gets to see my life too? Am I the idiot for this? Her mother says it's a terrible idea, so it's making me think that I am, but I just genuinely cannot see why. Obviously, I care for this girl, and I will care for her life too, but a relationship has to be two-sided. I don't think it's out of the question to show her my life too. You are the idiot. You're not her father. You are a stranger to your daughter. You paid support for 3 years, which means for 7 years, the mother's been alone even financially. You don't get to walk back in because you have a girlfriend you think you might be with forever. This child isn't a relationship device. She's a human whose life and feelings matter more than you and your selfish desire to make amends. Try therapy to deal with your daddy issues before marriage and having children with this new woman. Why did you stop paying child support? Why haven't you started paying again? Sounds like OP owes 7 years worth of child support before he gets any say. After that, it's still going to be a long prove it that he's serious about being in his kid's life. The obvious conclusion is that his only motivation here is to con this new girl into thinking he's a halfway decent person, or at least not someone who will do to her and her potential child what he did to his ex and hers. The fact that he's clearly only interested in the child as a human prop to deceive his girlfriend and doesn't register the emotional harm that would do to the child pretty solidly indicates that he would likely do it again. Precisely, he knows she'll eventually find out he has a kid and knows that once she realizes that he ran out on the woman and child as soon as the birth happened and even stopped making payments 3 years in, she'll know what a selfish jerk he is. Your daughter isn't some trophy to show off. I 30 female have a set of triplets. Their father's supposed to get them every other weekend, but he rarely gets them. Maybe once every few months if he has a girlfriend he's trying to impress. So, my daughters are mixed. I'm very particular about how they look most of the time. If we go out in public, I make sure they look good, I make sure their hair is done, and they have very nice dresses. 99% of the time if someone sees my girls, they look magazine-worthy. However, they are toddlers and you just don't put on a pretty dress on them when they go to the park to play. I had taken them to get their pictures made for Christmas and after we went to the park because they deserved a reward for being so good. So, I changed them into some really warm rompers and coats. They also had hats and gloves. They weren't nasty or anything, but playing in dresses in the winter is just a no. They needed warm play clothes. Max called and asked what we were doing, and I told him we were headed to the park. He wanted to see the girls, so I told him to meet us at the park. I assumed he would be alone, and I kind of assumed he wouldn't show up at all because it was very out of character for him. He showed up with a woman and a child. He immediately got angry with me because the girls weren't wearing pretty clothes. They were wearing winter play clothes. He also complained that one of the girls' hair looked a little messy. She's a toddler and messes with her hair, so of course it's messy. Also, she was wearing a winter hat, so you could barely see her hair anyway. I told him no, I wasn't going to put them back in their dresses, and I wasn't going to keep fixing her hair just for her to take it down again. It's stressful for her and me. She was happily playing and didn't care at all. Anyway, he was very angry, and I'm not sure if I was being the idiot or not. The woman he came with apologized to me for his behavior, and I told her not to worry about it. Added to add, he's always been particular about outward appearances. He's always clean-shaven and meticulous about his hair and clothing. Nothing can be even slightly dirty or messy. So, I wasn't that surprised he immediately was upset about their appearances. Not the idiot. He doesn't help you with the triplets, but then shows up out of the blue just to criticize your parenting. I'd remind him that they have 2 parents and he's welcome to be involved with dressing them and doing their hair anytime he likes. I hope this idiot is paying child support. He villainizes you for taking care of your child. Yes, of course it's a good idea to risk my children getting hypothermia to impress a man who doesn't care about them. Whoever that man is, he's a wretch and a leech. He only wishes to impress based on living, breathing beings with feelings that care and cherish. He uses living children to show and tell for his new flame every other week, which is gross. But ultimately, he fails when he can't keep up the perfect parent facade in front of his newest prey, a mother who sees right through it. And he was being so rude that a woman he brought along, possibly his girlfriend, who you'd never met before, felt compelled to apologize to you, his ex, for his behavior. Wow. How many more barrels can he scrape the bottom of? Then tell him he can dress them how he likes the next time he bothers to pick them up for his appointed weekend. My wife lost her mother to cancer 2 years ago. It was horrible and it took a toll on everyone, but obviously my wife more than anything. They were very close, pretty much best friends. We knew it was coming and the illness took over our lives, which is to be expected. I also knew my wife would struggle when she finally did pass, so I tried to convince her to go to therapy, but she refused. We have 2 older children, a young teen and a young child, and this year she gave birth to our youngest. This is the only grandchild my mother-in-law never got to meet. The whole pregnancy was very bittersweet and my wife kept saying, "I wish Mom was here. I wish Mom could meet him," etc. Again, to be expected. But the issue has come up that even before our son was born, every event went back to her mom. At first I understood, but it's become like we have this cloud hanging over us, preventing us from fully enjoying happy moments. I've tried talking to my wife about it gently, but she gets super defensive and refuses to even talk about therapy. Our oldest became a teen over the weekend. She had spoken to her mom privately and said she'd like for there to be no talk of her grandmother. She wanted a happy celebration and to not get sad that her grandmother wasn't there. My wife agreed. We went out to dinner and everything was fine. Towards the end, we had cake. My wife said, "It's just so sad that Grandma can't be here. She'd be so proud of who eldest has turned out to be. I wish she could be here." Our eldest got mad. She blew out her candles, but didn't speak for the rest of the dinner. When we got home, I spoke to my wife privately and said what she did wasn't fair. I said she could have excused herself if she was that emotional, but she honestly didn't seem to be. I told her that this couldn't continue to happen. She told me that wasn't fair. I said what isn't fair is this rain cloud she forces over us. She's been off ever since and won't really talk to me or our eldest. She's saying that we are insensitive. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. Your wife needs grief counseling. She's the idiot. Your child just had her entrance into being a teenager made about death by her mother. It's not about her grandma. It's not about your wife. It's about your kid, and she was denied that. So, your wife is being insensitive, not you or your child. Yeah, the wife's grief is very understandable, but it seems like she's tainting the memory of grandma for her daughter and for the rest of the family. It's enough of a constant situation that your daughter, who's only a young teen, literally asked her in advance not to do this one time for her own birthday celebration, and your wife wouldn't do it. It's obviously a problem. And just to point out, even if she refuses to get therapy, that doesn't mean the rest of you can't. You may have to learn coping strategies or ways to redirect. I don't get this take. Why should the rest of the family, who by all accounts seem to be doing fine, be the ones who have to put all the effort in to tiptoe around mom, who refuses to get help for her parent issues? It's been 2 years. 2 years of OP trying to tell her to get help, and of the kids hearing about their dead grandma on every special occasion. The person who needs help is the person creating the problem. Why should they have to figure out how to redirect their mom's behavior? They're kids, not trained